You're watching the press preview. We'll first look at what's on the front pages as they arrive. In the next half hour, we'll see what's making the headlines with journalist and author Rachel Shabi and editor of the Jewish Chronicle, Wallis-Simons. So let's see what's on some of those front pages for you now. Well, the Observer reports the civil servant investigating allegations of lockdown-breaking parties in Downing Street has been given access to staff movements, including security swipe card data. The Sunday Times leads with Conservative MP Nusrat Ghani's claim that she was sacked from her ministerial post because she was a Muslim. The Mail on Sunday finds the Prime Minister is at war with the so-called Whitehall blob, or top civil servants to you and I, over the working from home. The UK has accused Moscow of planning to install a pro-Russian leader in Ukraine. That's on the front of the Sunday Telegraph, as we were saying. The cost of living crisis is the focus for the Sunday People. Food writer Jack Munro has warned that those on low incomes will starve due to the rising cost of food. According to a poll in the Sunday Express, 72% think Prince Andrew should be stripped of his Duke of York title. And the Sunday Mirror splashes on TV personality Katie Price, who could face prison for allegedly breaching a restraining order. And we're joined tonight by Rachel Shabi and Jake Wallis-Simons to take us through the newspapers. Good evening to you both. Let's start with the Sunday Times and this exclusive story that we've been covering this evening. The claims of Nusrat Ghani of being told that her Muslimness, I think the quote is, made colleagues uncomfortable. She was very, very upset by what she was told by a whip. So the whip story continues. Take us into the details of this, Rachel.
Yeah, this story is both horrifying and incredibly serious. So Nusrat Ghani, as you said, and have been reporting this evening, says she was fired from her ministerial post in early 2020. She was transport minister, and she was told, and this is a quote that she's quoting, Muslim women minister status was making colleagues uncomfortable. This is absolutely shocking. It's straightforward racism. She says that she felt humiliated and powerless. She was also told not to make a fuss about it because if she did, she would be ostracized from her colleagues. So it's straightforwardly a case of anti-Muslim prejudice, incredibly serious. I have to say, not surprising to the extent that the Conservative Party has been mired in anti-Muslim sentiment for many, many years now. It is both a huge problem and one that the party itself is in just gross denial about, to the extent that in 2018, former party chair Brendan Lewis said, well, I don't even think we've got a problem. But this is something that's been going on for a very long time. Even when we look at the Prime Minister and his own Islamic-phobic comments about Muslim women, which then caused a spike in abuse and hate towards Muslim women on the streets. And then you look at, councillors making Islamophobic comments and then being removed, but then quietly reinstalled. And you look at the party's own membership, where a majority believe in Muslim conspiracy theories, where just under, I think something like 43% say they wouldn't want a Muslim person to lead the country, and where the vast majority believe that Sharia law exists in parts of London. It is a huge problem for the party. It is appalling, and it has been in denial about it for a long time. And I just want to say, very difficult for someone like Nusrat Ghani to speak up about this. So, respect and full support and solidarity with her.
I must just say that we have been reporting that Mark Spencer, Chief Whip, has identified himself as the whip involved in this story. He's saying that the fact that she was sacked or told she'd be sacked because of her Muslim faith, that's completely false and defamatory. He says he came forward to ensure that other whips weren't drawn into the matter. And so he identified himself. He says, these accusations are completely false and I consider them to be defamatory. I've never used those words attributed to me. It's disappointing that when this issue was raised before, Ms Ghani declined to refer the matter to the Conservative Party for a formal investigation. I provided evidence to the Singh investigation into Islamophobia, which concluded that there was no credible basis for the claims These allegations were first made in March 2020, when Ms Ghani was invited to use the formal complaints procedure. She declined to do so. So that's the very latest coming in from him this evening, Jake. I have to say also, those tweets have since been deleted. We got this from Twitter, but they've since been deleted.
Yeah, so Mark Spencer appearing to come forward and name himself as the whip in question and make this very strong denial in a very proactive way does complicate the picture a lot and makes it a lot more difficult to pin down. I think what needs to happen really is that a full inquiry needs to take place to establish the truth of these very, very serious allegations so that we can all understand what went wrong and the appropriate action can be taken. But this story really comes in the context of a bigger story, which is about the culture of the behaviour of the whips in Parliament. William Ragg, the backbencher, is poised to report or to speak to a police officer about some of these allegations that whips had blackmailed MPs in order to behave in the way they wanted, including having negative stories about them in the locker and threatening to release them if they didn't behave in the way that the whips desired. And this really, I think to most people involved in Westminster, this comes as no great surprise because the activities of the whips has long been rather strong-armed at times. But of course, there is a line. And really, it's for the government and now the police to decide whether that line has been crossed.
Yes, we shall remain to be seen as to what involvement the police have in this particular story. Also in the Sunday Times, there's a piece about the inquiry into parties, turning the spotlight on Carrie Johnson and her friends. What more do we know about this, Rachel?
Well, that's right. So this has been reported by the Observer as well. So as part of Sue Gray's, so this senior civil servant is looking into Partygate. As part of her inquiries, she's potentially uncovered another party. So I believe this would be the 10th. Although honestly, we've kind of lost count. There's been so many. And this is thought to be friends of Carrie Johnson, and it's also thought to be actually in the Prime Minister's home. So, this is taking the inquiry really into a much deeper level of just awful behaviour at a time when, as we know, everyone else was putting up with the most difficult and painful sacrifices in lockdown.
Jake, do you think the importance of this inquiry by Sue Gray has been overblown? Because we have had the Prime Minister admit that he went down to the party, if we can call it that, in the garden and spent a short period of time, and he has apologised. What more is the inquiry going to tell us that we don't already know?
Well, rightly or wrongly, it has taken on this sort of supercharged status as being the final judgment on what exactly went on in Downing Street during that period. And Sue Gray has had access to things like emails that the public hasn't seen. There was in particular that email in which the Prime Minister was allegedly warned about the folly of such parties during lockdown. And she identified that and has seen that. So there is new evidence that she has seen that the public hasn't seen. I think that the Tories are really hoping that this is not going to be a death blow for the Prime Minister. But I think the public at large, like you say, in the court of public opinion, I think that the consensus is pretty clear, and Boris's plummeting popularity at the moment shows that very clearly. But I think in the bigger picture, politicians in the past, MPs from Tony Blair to Margaret Thatcher, David Cameron, have come back from close to death in the past. And I think a lot of Tory activists and members will be hoping that Boris can do the same because he does have qualities to reach constituencies, particularly in the north, that other MPs and ministers have not been shown to have. And so he really is vital to the current picture of how the Tory party has been campaigning in the last couple of years.
Rachel, what more does the Express tell us about the blackmail claims that William Ragg is speaking to police about?
So there seems to be quite a few of these claims, and this is being reported by several newspapers. So, for instance, Chris Bryant, who's the Commons Standards Committee chair, the Labour chair, has said that he's spoken in the last few days to some dozen Tory MPs who have said that there have been, claims of being blackmailed, and that obviously is not just terrible in terms of a bullying workplace culture in Parliament, in Westminster, but it's also, there's a legal issue there as well, which of course is why the police may want to be getting involved. I think one of the aspects of this is, this sort of bullying culture of the whips, trying to, strong-arm MPs to vote in a particular way, that has been sort of going on for some time. It's not a new thing. But I think what is particularly, that's awful for MPs, and no one should experience bullying in any workplace, of course. The added component to this in the Conservative context is the reports that MPs are being threatened with things being removed, projects being taken away for their constituents. So this idea that, constituencies essentially would be used as, blackmail, would be the collateral damage of MPs not voting in the way that the whips want them to.
And
that's
a very serious claim. And it must be said that also, we've noted that since the story has been in circulation, William Ragg has said that he's been briefed against, which sort of even feeds in more to evidence of this type of culture with the whips. And update, Mark Spencer has tweeted again that Nusrat Ghani's claims are completely false. That is the breaking. Let's have a look at this section. I want to sort of talk about Ukraine and have a look at the Telegraph front page. Liz Truss has released some intelligence, which is quite unusual, about what the UK believes Putin to be doing, and that is to bring in his pro-Russia regime. Give us a bit more detail, Jake.
Well, this is, as you said, a very unusual step by the Foreign Office to declassify secret intelligence so quickly in a live and unfolding situation. And what they are doing is seeking to reveal that President Putin is intending to invade Ukraine, and more than that, is intending to install a pro-Russian puppet government, if you like. Mr. Murayev being the candidate to be the new prime minister. Now, it should be said that he has strongly denied that, but to my mind, the Foreign Office would not plausibly release that intelligence if it wasn't serious about it and if it wasn't, in all likelihood, true. So this has really raised the stakes in Ukraine, which are already very high indeed. It places some pressure on Putin and sort of builds the case for the West, for NATO and other Western powers to step up and provide even more support for Ukraine. There have been some military aid to the Ukraine from Britain in particular recently, which helps to bolster their armed forces. But I think there needs to be more of a broad consensus in terms of a deterrent, particularly in terms of sanctions. There's been an idea of expelling Russia from the SWIFT international banking system, which is one action that would have some far-reaching consequences. So I think it's an attempt to really make the response from the West more robust and become a greater deterrent to Vladimir Putin before he does pull the trigger.
Rachel, what purpose do you think it serves for Liz Truss to release this information? Might it just tip Putin over the edge and actually have the reaction that nobody wants?
I think that is actually the most important question. Why is Liz Truss doing this? As you said yourself, it's a highly unusual move to release declassified intel. About intel. It's not really to have such faith in the reliability of intel after the Iraq war and the WMDs is quite eyebrow-raising in itself. The Guardian has covered this story as well, and it points out that some of the information that Liz Truss claims, i.e. about Ukrainian exiles working as former parliamentarians working as spies for Russia, around this situation has already been blown apart, given that those people in question actually live in Moscow as exiles and therefore are hardly undercover. So I'm not sure what Liz Truss is seeking here. This isn't intel that has been corroborated by any other country, I don't think. And it does seem that the UK is seeking to perhaps put some clear water between itself and the EU, like a demarcation, because it has been saying, you know, the EU isn't doing enough, we need to do more. But of course, this could just be sort of empty saber rattling and a bit of a distraction from the Prime Minister's current woes.
Yeah, it has to be said that the Foreign Office is saying that they have information that Mr. Murayev was being considered by Russia as a candidate to lead Ukraine, but they have declined to publish the actual intelligence itself. And Ms. Truss called the intelligence evidence that Russia was trying to subvert Ukraine and called for an end to the Kremlin's campaign of aggression. But Mr. Murayev himself dismissed the accusations as stupid and absurd, pointing out that he has been subject to Russian sanctions himself. So interesting that the actual intelligence hasn't been published itself. Let's move on to the Times front page. And Jake, take us into this story. The headline there, Metaverse already rife with sexual predators.
I mean, this is a story, frankly, that I don't understand. I mean, apparently there's something called the Metaverse, which is a virtual space that you access by putting on these Oculus goggles, and then you can see things in 3 dimensions, and everyone's represented by avatars, which, as to my mind, seem like big cartoons. And you can speak to them and interact with them. Microsoft has a platform that you can use right now. And it all just, frankly, makes me feel very, very old indeed. And I can't understand why anybody would want to use this. I mean, isn't the real world good enough? Isn't Facebook good enough, and Twitter and all the rest of it? And it seems like the only people who are using it are sexual predators and racists and transphobes and all the rest of it. Surprise, surprise. They're all, being very offensive in this virtual space because I suppose they can't be in real life. So that, to me, seems to be the top and bottom of the story.
Yeah, quite an ugly story, actually. Let's just quickly, we've got time for the Mail front page, Rachel. And from working from home, Boris declares war on civil servants, refusing to head back to the office.
Well, that's right. So civil servants, and I suspect they aren't the only ones, aren't that keen on going back to the office, certainly not full time. And I think this is sort of, that they are representing a wider population that really has quite mixed feelings about returning to office work full time. And we're seeing all kinds of hybrid, flexi-time arrangements come to pass. I think the financial sector is going in that direction as well. High tech, the tech sector already gone in that direction. Yeah. So I think there's something
many people have got used to working at home, including yourself and Jake, doing a wonderful job on the paper review tonight. Thank you both.